Go.
All right, you're good.
Okay. Welcome to the Atheist Christian Book Club. Happy New Year 2019. Can you believe it? Great to see you guys. We are a monthly gathering of atheists and Christians. It seems to be usually about half and half. And we respectfully, usually, discuss books from both perspectives. We'll alternate. We do an atheist book, Christian book, atheist book. We did The Devil's Delusion last month in December. This month we're doing Jerry Coyne's book, Why Evolution is True. Let me just get an idea. How many of you, this is your first time to be at the Atheist Christian Book Club? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Five new ones. Great. Now, usually we don't make new members sit in the outer chamber out there.
The outer darkness.
Outer darkness.
That's what the evolutionists said. Yeah.
But we are at overcapacity right now, really. So we also want to welcome our Facebook Live audience that are following along that way. If you're watching by Facebook Live, feel free to ask questions or make comments in the comment section below. We have Justin here is monitoring the Facebook Live, and he will share any questions or comments that you might have with the group as a whole. So let me get a few. How many of you got to read Why Evolution is True? Got it? One? Okay.
I read it a few years ago.
A few years ago, all right. How many of you, I get an alternate, if you didn't have time to finish the book, there was a video I recommended for you. How many of you got to watch that? Got to get a good feel for that? As we get started right now, Bill, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, just what do you guys think? I mean, you Christians especially. I mean, is this Jerry's world where Jerry Coyne is his own little crazy evolutionist, paradigm, or is this just, false? What do you think, Jerry?
You waited all night to say that, didn't you?
What do you think, Terry? Is it evolution true?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that kind of sounds okay. Well, let's wrap this up. I think we might have some people that disagree with you, Terry. What do you Christians think?
I think he did a good job of summarizing that worldview, and he didn't seem to be, for the most part, condescending or anything like that. So I felt like he put his case forward.
So you read the book, you didn't watch the YouTube?
Oh, yeah, well, no, the YouTube was a little bit more that way. We've got another one, too, that we're going to share in a little bit here that might put a little bit of light on.
Oh, yeah, we got some good videos, believe me.
Videos here,
So from my perspective, I mean, I thought his science was good.
But first of all, what is your perspective?
I'm a Christian.
Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, come on, you're a Christian evolutionist, aren't you, Conrad?
Evolution does not affect my religious faith one way or the other.
Me too.
I felt like he was good on the science part, but I'm more in the Francis Collin camp that I do think there is a divine force behind it.
Oh my gosh, so
And
you're
I
a
think-
theistic evolutionist?
Yeah, I think
You're
that-
on a slippery slope,
I think
David.
it's-
Just tell you that.
Well, I think that the author was a little bit hostile to that. When he stuck to the science, I was good, but he would, veer off into a little bit of vehemence against theism, which I thought was unnecessary.
Thought that was.
Let me give a little historical background here. The first time we kind of tackled this was the first year of the book club, and we had Aaron Ra, who wrote a book. He's an atheist, well-known local atheist, who wrote a book on, what's the name of this book? Do you remember?
Foundation, falsehoods of creationism.
Foundational Falsehoods or something
Whatever,
like that.
yeah. Aaron Ra is like,
creationism.
Oh,
God.
Please don't say a God.
he is the God of, I was in Las Vegas just visiting the atheist community there, and they had a picture of Aaron Ra. It might as well have been Jesus. I mean, they just adored
Was he
it.
on a cross?
He's the new Madeline
He might
Murray.
as well. So, okay, go ahead. So,
I just said he's the new Madeline Murray. But just to wrap up on what we were talking about, I do have to take issue with Dr. Coyne's very first part of his book. He was talking about the school system that was going to teach evolution, but they wanted to read a statement first that said, we're going to teach evolution, but we want you to be aware that some people have another viewpoint, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, teach the controversy, right?
Well, and he was adamant that that was a constitutional violation and it was a travesty. I mean, that was not establishment of religion just to say some people believe in God, and I couldn't believe he was so
Well, Jerry
adamant about
absolutely
that. Right?
hates creationists, and he's like on the far.
Yeah. Well, R. and Rob was pretty strident in his position, and some of you remember that. How many of you were there for the R. and Rob? That was the first time that we actually had the author
Anybody
of the book
get to touch
here.
the hem of his garment? I didn't.
Besides you, Bill, no.
Yeah,
But,
Wow.
He didn't like the way I shook hands.
But
He told me I hurt him.
we appreciate that Aaron was willing to be with us and to take our questions, and that was the first time. It was probably like the third largest group we've ever had. A lot of he brought a lot of his supporters and friends with him.
His disciples.
So then we kind of went 180 degrees, and then last year we looked at the book by Francis Collins, The Language of God. And in that book you have someone who's a full evangelical Christian. However, he was the head of the Human Genome Project, and it certainly supports every aspect of traditional evolution, including common origin, common ancestry.
The key is, I mean, the book is all about the evidence. Yeah, just show me the evidence. True, we happen to have someone from the Institute for Creation Research that's going to build this monstrous $30 million museum very shortly in May, right, Truett?
Yeah, they're finishing.
And we're going to have an Atheist Christian Book Club tour for those who want to come and kind of take a tour of the new
I'm not
museum.
committed to that, but it's a possibility.
Hopefully,
Okay, well,
hopefully.
So, Truett, why shouldn't we believe in evolution? Is the evidence compelling to you?
Can we define evolution?
Yeah.
Well, let me back up and kind of go through the history first. So let me kind of finish up where we were. Last month, just to kind of bring us up to speed of how the book club has progressed in this, is we looked at the book The Devil's Delusion by Berlinski, which is a guy who's a secular Jew. He's, I guess, agnostic. He's certainly not a Christian or a believer in God. But he is certainly also adamantly believes that that evolution is suspect, and that was that book was about. So we're trying to have the alternate perspective of that. So we went from the atheist who didn't believe in evolution. Now we're going to have an atheist who does believe in evolution with Jerry Coyne's book.
So we're fair and
why
balanced.
evolution is true. Then after our break, we're going to talk about our book for next month, which is going to kind of go in a different direction.
So, Truett, you know the evidence. You work at the place. What do you think?
About Coyne's book.
Or evolution in general. Just
Okay.
educate us.
Well, the model, I've been a few years since I read it. I remember it was a very well-written book. I finished it, I thought, yeah, that's pretty good. It's a pretty well-written book. I mean, the model that he's presenting is very, very outdated. There's a lot of evidence that have surfaced that, the mainstream community is questioning and or rejected the common ancestry thing. Craig Venter, he's no friend of creationists. He's a geneticist, and he just denied common descent in front of Dawkins and Krauss. He said, no, there's no common descent. He just kind of like brushed it aside. That's just an outdated. I'm sorry,
who was that?
Craig Venter.
Okay, yes.
He just brushed it aside as like, that's just an outdated way of thinking. And, New Scientist magazine, published a big old article saying Darwin was wrong about the tree of life. It's a complete mess. So obviously Stephen Gould had problems with the way that the tree is built. There's been a lot of research on the mechanisms of natural selection and mutation that have been, again, seriously questioned and or dismissed. The Royal Society hosted a debate about it. It got so big that the Royal Society
on natural selection.
On natural selection,
wow.
Because as he's promoting, it's an externalist account of adaptation of creatures. Creatures randomly mutate. Natural selection selects. And
so we putting too much faith in natural selection as evolutionists? Is that right?
Well, the data is supporting something different.
What would it support?
It support internal adaptation. So creatures sense their environment and internally adapt.
That's what we actually see. Most of the evidence that we're finding, and you often find articles of evolution where they're talking about internal adaptation and then if equivocating on the word, taking that from the term that's relative to internal evolution, and then all of a sudden they equivocate and apply that to a universal theory or law and call it the same thing. Well, those are two different meanings for that same word. And what you're really looking at is what people are calling engineered adaptability, which is very much a complex design feature.
You've been reading Randy Galiz's articles.
Sure, I've read several things.
Which are great articles.
Could you, Neil, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you kind of give us a simple, like a definition of the two ways of looking at that same word and why it's an equivocation?
So equivocation is a logical fallacy where you use the same word, but it has two different meanings. So the simple example is where you talk about, I'm going to go to the bank, and then you talk about the bank of a river. So when you do that in a statement, you're changing meaning. So if I talk about evolution of an organism, and then I come to the conclusion that this proves evolution as a multi-species event, I've changed the meaning of that word. I've gone from something that's internal element and design characteristic to something that I'm saying is a universal truism. That's equivocation.
So you think Jerry Coyne is overstating his case?
Oh, there's so many fallacies in there. If you'll indulge me, let me give you a couple examples. One of the best is, now you got to remember that this Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, has two main principles. The first one is that there's a random, it's a deterministic material thing that changes. There's no friendly uncle or master designer. The second, which is almost a co-principle, is this natural selection, which is a process of kind of winnowing out as well as improving species, okay? They operate. And so in his book, where he talks about the chapter on the engine of evolution, on page 118 to 119, he comes out with this, which is, listen to this. He says, this brings up what is surely the most widespread misunderstanding about Darwinism. The idea that in evolution, everything happens by chance. No evolutionist ever argued that natural selection is based on chance. Quite the opposite. Could a completely random process alone make a hammering woodpecker, a tricky bee, camouflage katydids? And if not, would sudden evolution, if it was forced to depend on random mutations alone, the species would quickly degenerate? Chance alone cannot explain the marvelous fit between individuals and the environment. Then he goes on, he gets to his conclusion here. He says, but it is the filtering of that variation by natural selection that produces adaptations, and natural selection is manifestly not random. It is a powerful molding force. And then he goes on to talk about it. Okay, what he's just said here is a huge tautology, okay? Because what he says is he's posting natural selection as the agent of change, okay? In fact, this whole theory should be called the theory of natural selection. It's nothing to do with the theory of evolution. So if we say that natural selection is an agent of change, what's the principle behind it, okay? Well, the principle behind it is circumstance. And what's there? Circumstance is a word that means things that are around there, okay? So where does this circumstance, what's its genesis? Where does this happen? Well, it can't happen by any identified agent because your principles tell you that's not possible. So the only thing that can cause circumstance is happenstance.
But here's the thing, Neil.
Now wait, let me just get to the conclusion. So what is happenstance? Well, happenstance is chance, right? So what is conclusion? This whole paragraph is a giant tautology. What it really says, it happens not by chance, but it happens due to chance, okay? It also has two other fallacies to it. It's also what's called the middleman fallacy, where he's starting with a process and claiming that the process is the beginning and end of this whole thing. And that leads to an infinite regress, because all you do is keep asking, well, what's that process? What caused that environment? What caused that environment? What caused that environment? There's no conclusion, there's no end, there's no tellus to that thing. So that's a middleman philosophy. Fallacy.
Okay, Chris.
The final point is he's affirming the consequence, okay? It's the fallacy of affirming the consequence, which says, if evolution P, then natural selection Q. We observe the results of natural selection Q. Therefore, evolution is true P. That is the fallacy of affirming the consequence.
But
so the logic, it does not stand, regardless of the science.
I got it.
Okay.
But we have this beautiful transition from the will. We have Pakicetus, like a wolf-like land creature. Then it goes to the Amblicitus. Then it goes to, Duoderms. It's a beautiful transition. Same with the Homo sapiens. We have a beautiful transitions like Australopithecus, who has the legs of a Homo sapien. Okay, it's human-like. Then in the middle, he has longer limbs, but not quite chimpanzee-like. And then in the brain, that's a small brain, that's a chimp brain. So you see it evolved into the Homo habilis, the Homo ergaster.
But
it's a beautiful trend. Well, wait a minute. Let me let Chris respond, and then you go.
No, yeah, sure.
These are like 5 different things, but the randomness tautology, doesn't sound really like a tautology though, because I mean there's random mutations at play. There's random circumstances throughout the lifetime of an individual at play, sure, but the ability of a individual to weather that storm, whether or not it is the natural selection thing is still at play. It's not, that aspect is that's still a non-random thing, whether or not the happenstance is random, whether or not the mutations are random. The overall survivability of what genes get passed on, that's still a non-random process, and that process is not affected by happenstance or by genes.
So I would agree with that. That's again internal adoption. That's internal hereditary factors that are passed along as part of a normal process. So that's not random.
I just don't know what's going to make you happy, Neil. I mean, he's giving you the evidence. I mean, what's
Sorry, this is for clarification, because you brought up stuff and Drew brought up stuff. This internal. Can you explain what you mean by internal adaptability as opposed to, I guess, maybe?
Are you talking about Lamarckian adapting?
So if your body gets too hot, it starts to perspire. It has a system to take care of it. If you get a dust mite in your eye, it waters, okay? So those are just rudimentary reactions that the body has, and there's more of them as you get into the immune system, etc., that are very complex on how it tends to take care of itself and react to foreign intrusions. Animals will change their coat, the color of their hair. In the winter it's white, and in the summer they go back and it's dark again. So those are the creatures themselves reacting based on the system that they have to the environment. It is not the environment telling that creature, you've got to have a white coat all of a sudden. There's no communication there at all. So,
but you don't find the fossil evidence convincing the transition, like with the Amblicitus. You have like the blowhole here, then it gets there, and then finally when it becomes a full blown will, it's
I don't find first of all, a couple things about fossils. One is, I think the guy admits in the book that we only see about what 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah, very few fossils.
Okay. And we have yet to find a fossil that is totally whacked out transformative mutation, because apparently they all die out. So I'm not convinced that those things like Australopithecus. I'm not convinced that those are sequential. The reason being, if you'll just go back in our recent history, there was at one time here at least 4 or 5 different humanoid species.
Right.
The Hottentots died out. There was 2 or 3 types of pygmies that died out.
He says 1.1 million years ago you had 3 different species that just came to an evolutionary dead end. But then you have Homo habilis. You get closer and closer to Homo erectus and Homo habilis that does tools, and the brain is getting gradually bigger. We're bipedal, and by the way, bipedalism, us walking upright, comes before the larger brain. But what they see is Homo sapiens is a different species than Australopithecus, than Homo ergaster, than Homo habilis. Am I right, Ken?
Yeah, I think what may be going on here, there's more of a foundational question of, if you don't believe in an old Earth or the traditional dating models that scientists routinely use. You know, we're just shooting in the wind. We can't have a conversation. It's like having a conversation about who Jesus was with somebody who doesn't believe he existed. If you don't think you can trust the dating of the bones that you're talking about, then
Well, obviously, but
Well, Bill just has homophobia.
I think though, Ken, that you can have a discussion whether you agree on the dating system or not, because what you want to be able to do is take any worldview or system and just say is it internally consistent. Okay, so let's just to be able to evaluate, let's just buy everything and then take it and put it together and see, okay, does that answer this question? Does it do a good job of explaining reality?
Well,
you had a question. Oh, go ahead.
I think I was responding to Neil, who seemed to be implying that this fossil record that we have isn't necessarily in the sequence that evolutionists would say. In other words, they might have been contemporaneous even.
Exactly.
Or just, so if you don't accept the antiquity or the dating system that shows that the dating the millions of years of the
Well, truly, you know, here you're like a 6,000 year guy, right?
I mean, you know, there's disagreement among creationists, but fortunately, I just finished editing a book about radiometric dating written by a nuclear physicist who worked at Fermilab for 20 years. So we can talk about the dating system.
Oh my gosh, you
That's
don't.
not our main thing tonight.
No, but Bill, here's the question you asked me. What's my issue with this, and why I raised the logical fallacies of this thing? Because what irks me about it, or what I find a little perturbing, is the fact that this book, and it's written in a very affirmative manner. In fact, so when you make declarative statements, okay, you subject yourself to logic. If he was saying it's inductive, if he says, it's probable, which by the way is littered with those words, but it's probable that evolution is a way this thing got done. And I'm not going to stand on my soapbox and say every other version is outrageous or non-scientific. If that's the way we talked about it, I would.
Well, you're not alone. Brady feels the same way, that he overstated his case.
Yeah, that was our conversation before dinner today. Was just, he's coming up saying it is a fact. This is a fact. And so, what do you mean by fact? Because just on the next page, that was on page 16. On page 17, he comes up and says, "Well, all scientific truth is provisional." Well, wait, hold on. So are we equivocating the definition of the word fact? Or you can't have it both ways, and that's what he seems to do. He was really rough with the philosophy.
I didn't read the
Oh, go ahead. Now you have your hand up.
Well, one of the things that helped change my mind from a former young Earth creationism to someone who does now accept evolution is the fossil record. But even if you don't agree with the dating methods, and Jerry Coyne talks about many ways to falsify evolution. And one of them would be to find fossils in the wrong order or in the wrong layers or something like that. So, the proverbial
rabbit in the Precambrian, yeah.
Precambrian, okay. So you don't even have to agree on the dates of the rocks. You can still show that below, the PK boundary or whatever, there's none of these. Or below this level, there are no birds. Below this level, there are no reptiles. Even if you don't agree necessarily when the dates are, I think everybody would have to acknowledge at least the sorting, which I've heard, and I don't know if this is maybe you can tell me there's a better explanation, but I've heard what I think is kind of a silly explanation from that as far as
Noah's flood, where the
sorting it out. That seems silly to me. I don't know if
it's because it's silly. Yeah. So anyway, Truett. So what's your explanation for that? Why we don't find rabbits in the Precambrian? We just find little trilobites.
Well, we essentially do actually. I mean, we find birds, all throughout the
Cambrian.
No. But there is that rough sorting, but you do find stuff kind of out of order anyway. And anyway, when they find a fossil, they do, if they don't know where to put it, they put it in the evolutionary sequence.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It's kind of like, well,
Are you saying we're being disingenuous?
To some degree, it might be self-referential. In other words, how do we know we're decided when we know these are older than these, so we
why
can
do
date
you
it?
never find a dolphin with next to a trilobite? Find a dolphin next to a trilobite.
No, but what you find is you find sharks, you find all kinds of fish, all mixed up with Tyrannosaurus Rex and all those up in Wyoming. There's fish in with the mammals. It's a jumble, just as if a giant flood took all those creatures and crashed them in.
That's the Morrison Formation.
It's absolutely a jumble. There's
So
no
Neil,
So I have a serious question. Why can't you find, there's billions of trilobite fossils around the world. Why do you never find a mammal fossil with them, like a dolphin?
Well, the explanation is, well, you know, they were buried at their, you know, in their order of their habitat, which Tim Clary at ICR was actually doing really interesting research on the geologic column. He's doing original research on oil wells, and he studied 1,500 oil wells across 3 continents, and he's very, really data-filled conclusion. It's not a very interesting title, but he's coming out with an article in a few months, a global sea level rock curve, where he basically presents all of his research about geologic columns, and he does this every day, all day long. He's studying these little columns, and he's shown that the water levels rise up and then kind of recede and then get farther across the continents and then kind of recede up around the quaternary. So it's actually really interesting.
Is he using Noah's flood to prove this?
No, he's studying data and then interpreting it.
Oh, okay.
So he's using where they drill oil wells very deep in, and just looking at.
You can look at the layers, and so that's what he's doing. He's tracing the layers across all these different continents.
So what's his point?
To trace the global flood layers.
So he believes in Noah's flood.
Well, he's not a creationist.
You believe in evolution?
You know, the other issue with the geological record is that the Earth, there's substantial evidence that the Earth has been subjected to massive cataclysmic events. And many of those are from extraterrestrial situations.
Yeah, the Hadrian period when it began, but we don't have any evidence of a global flood, and the Earth would be ringed.
This Earth has been so torn up over the years. You're walking on a very thin plank when you try to go back and divine through these columns and these mesas that are there in some cases and nowhere in some other
Well, I know there's no complete geological column, but we have parts of it throughout the world, and that's, am I right, Ken? That's how we...
You're engaging in postdoc ergo propter hoc. You're
oh my God!
Self-fulfilling prophecy, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just what I was going to say. Logical fallacy.
I hate to swear.
It's like
No, I did that. I thought I committed some sins, but this is a new one on me. Yeah, okay.
Yes, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Let's go to the video.
Hey, we've got something really fundamental, may I?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Ron.
And that is that in one of his YouTube presentations, I actually watched a couple of them. He starts off by saying...
About Jerry,
yes,
Dr. Coyne.
Yes. If you believe that atoms are true, and you don't believe that evolution is true, you're a moron.
That was extreme.
Bill's thinking on that one.
Your point?
Moron is Greek for what?
Now here's my point. Here's my point.
What's your point?
Atoms are testable in the laboratory. Empirical evidence. All the evidence on evolution is all forensic. There's no comparison. There's no parallel between belief in scientific validity and truth of.
Do you think OJ killed
physics facts?
Nicole?
Yes.
Based on what?
I think he's getting to the
Forensic.
DNA, the
The
genetic.
evidence.
Everything we're
That's
talking
not the
about is
point.
forensic.
I don't think he's saying
We're trying to figure out what happened
That's
in
not
the
the
past.
point.
Yeah. But it's
And
just
what
as
evidence
valid.
is
It's
there
just as
about-
valid for coming to the truth as any laboratory experiment.
But
Yeah,
it's-
well, yeah,
I think what he's saying is apples and oranges. Not that forensic evidence is invalid,
But
but it's not the same
They're
kind of
just as
evidence.
valid. I mean,
We have genetic markers. And by the way, Jerry Coyne wrote another book, which we might do. It's called Fact versus Faith. And what he says is stop trying to reconcile the Bible with evolution and genetics. They can't be reconciled. They're not non-overlapping magisterial. Creationism of the Bible is just wrong. Okay,
No,
try to understand.
Okay, let's
I'm
do
not
this.
trying to-
Let's do a video and we'll hold it. You'll be the first to speak.
I'm not trying to reconcile anything.
Okay.
I just want to see what is the evidence and what can I
Show me the
infer from
evidence, right? Show me the money.
Now, Bill found a video
Oh,
that
okay,
he
you'll get on
really
that.
wants us to watch,
Okay.
and it's Richard Dawkins, who's author of course, The God Delusion and others.
Wait a minute, I gotta take a
atheists,
pill first.
interviewing Wendy Wright, who's the past president of Women, Concerned Women for America. And basically, it's about an 8-minute clip, but this is kind of an example of how we as Christians and atheists can talk past each other, and we're not hearing each other. And I hope what we're doing here, including Bill, that we do not try to do that. That we actually try to hear what the other person's saying, and to take them seriously. And that doesn't happen in this particular interview. But part of the issue that we're up against is a worldview versus worldview. And an illustration I think I used maybe 2 years ago with the group is, if you ever think of a jigsaw puzzle, and how many of you ever put together one of those 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles? How about 6 giant piece puzzles?
Yes.
Okay, it's the same thing. If I had one puzzle piece and it's blue with a little bit of white on it, the room get a big argument. Is that the sky with a piece of cloud, or is that the ocean with a piece of wave? And we all argue because we have a different worldview in mind. The box top functions as the worldview. So once you see that it's the New Mexico desert, you know this is not off the coast of New Mexico. This has to be the sky, has to be and then the puzzle piece looks totally different to it. It's a piece. And so if you don't understand that, we can end up ridiculing the other person, or belittling them and not taking them seriously. So what we want to try to do, both me as a Christian, all of us as Christians or atheists, is to try to understand the other person in context and seriously, and then evaluate that internally. Okay, if with those givens, does this then make sense? Does this better explain? So this is maybe an example how not to have a conversation.
Not
to have a
to
conversation.
look at the other person's view, which you guys do very well. This does not mean, I'm just trying to show the other people by Facebook and stuff how not to argue with somebody or try to. Both these people are very powerful people. She's one of the 100 most influential people who voted in 2005 in America. So they both have their agendas. They both are talking past each other, and Richard goes and talks about the evolution of Homo sapiens. This might as well be water off a duck's back. Just tell me if this is what you think.
And I felt like Richard
she doesn't even
Dawkins
listen.
Yeah, I felt like Richard Dawkins was very remarkably more nice than usual. Well,
Thanks, Bill.
I just thought it was a good example of he gave her the evidence and she could care. It's like water down a duck's back. She could care less. Am I
She
right?
wanted to know his motivation.
Huh?
She wanted to know his motivation.
She thought, the agenda.
There's an agenda.
That's a fair question, I guess. But what's the point? We all have an agenda. And has any atheist here felt like a Christian was jamming Christianity on them?
No.
Does that make Christianity automatically false? Because by her logic, her viewpoint is automatically false as well. And that's really frustrating to me. And let's never watch that again.
She was also using the argument of consequences. If it's a bad consequence, therefore
that's a fallacy.
Yes,
both
all
of
the
them.
fallacies.
Both of them. You might. Dawkins was talking about. There's so many beautiful stories. Well, I mean, you can have. I could argue the Bible has beautiful stories. That doesn't make it true. So both of them had some arguments of fallacy, but that was not the big problem. The big problem is they're looking at the puzzle piece with the different box top.
I want to say that this book that we studied a few months ago was probably far more effective to talk about in a Christian audience than Jerry Coyne. Jerry Coyne was good technically, I think, but we're tribal people. All of us on either side, we're tribal. We listen to people that we perceive to be in our own camp. Like, for example, politically I'm a little left of center, but I read a book by Steven Pinker where he argued very convincingly the benefits of capitalism.
Yeah.
He's basically dissing socialism. I respect him. He's in my camp, so I listen to him. It's like, okay, you got good points there, and I embrace that. Likewise, I think somebody who recognizes that Francis Collins is in their camp, theologically as an evangelical, and who promotes his vision of creation and so forth, they're more likely to listen to him than a Jerry Coyne or a Richard Dawkins. I think just socially that's the way we're constructed. So even if Coyne knocked it out of the ballpark compared to Collins from a technical standpoint, I think this is more valuable to discuss than Coyne. Just my own opinion.
Well, even Dawkins kind of agreed with that. I mean, he didn't mention Francis Collins or anything, but he said that if Christian would say, okay, they accept evolution as factual, but they believe God did it, or what do you say, to the glory of God?
Yeah, exactly.
Then he would not have a problem with that.
She wouldn't look at it either.
So, I mean, I think there's a danger in a discussion that we're having tonight that, you've got the people who are opposed to evolution and people that are in favor of evolution, and it's almost as if you believe in evolution, you can't believe in God. You can't be a good Christian. It's like, some of the tone here has become almost like evolution equals godlessness, and
we still haven't defined evolution.
No, I think we're just.
When we talk about evolution in this context, we're talking about traditional, macroevolution.
How many Christians in this room do not accept that within species animals adapt on an ongoing basis and change over time based on their changing environment?
I think everybody accepts that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that's kind of beside the point, because when we're talking about evolution in the context of this discussion, we're talking about macroevolution. So we can talk about a bank that's the side of the river, and a bank that we go to withdraw our cash, but the context can tell us.
I think common descent would be part of the definition of what Coyne's talking about, and so the adaptation within species, I think that's not what they're really talking about here.
And also the idea that I mean, I guess it was true to mention a few people that have questioned evolution. Evolution has been dying for 150 years since Darwin proposed it, according to creationists, but it's still very much the default position in academic circles among just about every life scientist and earth scientist. Yeah, you can find people that oppose it. That doesn't mean anything per se. It doesn't mean that evolution is dying or that it's in crisis. I think that's overblown.
Well, so by the way, I hope as I make comments that I'm not misinterpreted here. I get a little excited when I'm speaking sometimes, but my intent is to just present issues that people can consider, and I'm certainly not trying to browbeat or demean anybody. I do think it's important that we consider the logic of things when we try to evaluate data, because data in itself, whether it's a bunch of skeletons we find in different places, it isn't of itself a conclusion that's a valid conclusion. It's an inductive statement.
Yeah. Right. You're just like any forensic, like a murder case. You can't replicate it, but you can make conclusions about the evidence.
But what I would suggest, that maybe you're saying the same thing, is that we don't get anywhere if we don't talk about these things.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important about being able to vet the issues and get a little excited from time to time, because it stimulates us when we go back somewhere in our car.
But see, his frustration, this is the frustration evolutionists have, is they show you the evidence, like Ambulocetus, halfway between Pakicetus and the Duoderms, the evolution. And they go, that's not enough. Give me another. Every time they come up with a transitional
process. So he did the roly-poly thing at the beginning of the book, where he said, like, creation is like the roly-poly down punch. And to me, I have the same thing with natural selection. Yeah, it's the roly-poly thing.
And you have the Archaeopteryx.
That kind of rolled off.
Yeah. Go ahead and do a little bit. What do you mean by roly-poly?
Well, in his book, he near the front, he makes the statement that it's frustrating to him, just kind of like Dawkins, I guess, was saying, that every time they knock a creationist argument out of down, like the roly-poly, it's the clown balloon that I had when I was a kid. You blow it up and you punch it and it just jumps back up, and it's frustrating.
Well, like Ray and Dick were talking about Archaeopteryx. And Archaeopteryx, if you guys don't know, is the ultimate transitional fossil where It has bird-like features, but also has teeth and claws, has reptilian features. A British zoologist, when he first saw the fossil, worshipped it. You know, so it's like frustrating to these guys, and that's why I wanted to show you the video, how frustrating it is when you present the evidence. And what we were reading, this is the evidence.
This may be a part of what the talking, not talking, talking past each other that you had with in the Dawkins interview. She was saying, you haven't shown me any evidence, but at one point she said from slime to the human body or something like that. And I think that's what she was getting at.
Yeah, that's what
but she didn't explain it that way. And so he's showing these fine transitional fossils here, but she's wanting to get me from slime to humans. But she just said that in passing.
And that's what he didn't get. He didn't get that she wanted a lizard to grow into a friggin', a bird like that. And it's not happening. And Richard Dawkins' book, where he lays out his evidence, is called The Greatest Show on Earth. And he compares it to a movie reel where you have these very slight gradations. And we can't see it in our lifetime. It's something that happens over, like the whale evolution from Pakistan, because the little wolf-like thing, to a full-scale aquatic whale happened in 10 million years. That's like a lunch break in evolutionary time. But the whole thing is just complex. And then 350 million years ago, you have the aquatic animals evolving into land. And then 50 million years ago, 300 million years later, you have the whales going back into the ocean. So now if you believe in progressive creationism or a God tweaked this thing, then what in the world are you doing? You're going from the sea to land, and then God goes, well, I'm kind of bored with it. I think I'll go back to
How many fallacies did I just hear?
A lot of those fossils are just so incomplete. You're filling it in with a lot of imagination. I mean,
really, the whale evolution fossils?
Yes. I mean, there's like a fragment of a skull, and then
they rebuild an entire.
You can look at, you can actually go and look at like what fossils, what bones they actually have. It's very few, and the same thing with the human fossils. It's very few.
Yeah, the human fossils. Which was the one?
Talk about data all day long about.
Some of them are incomplete, but some of them are quite complete.
True. Which one was based on a tooth? And they built the man and the woman just, and all they had was the tooth.
They built one guy out of a kneecap of an elephant.
I know, but see, when they find a leg, they can look at it and look at the pelvis, and like with chimps, they go, more flirted out. Where with Homo sapiens, they're more straightforward, and it shows bipedalism. But it's just what Richard Dawkins didn't get is to him it's like convincing, it's complete, it's there. To her, it's not. He didn't get that he needed to show evidence upon evidence. And some here, here's the book, we showed the evidence, and they're not. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, well, this is a sidebar, I guess, but I had a question about the author. I did not read the book. I saw the interview, and it seemed to me that he felt that if you believed in evolution, you could not believe in a God or supernatural power.
He might have that position,
He was a little hostile to religion.
But it's just, like, if you're a progressive creationist, young earth creationism is absurd. 6,000 years, it's just not even worth discussing. But old earth creationism has some...
Respectful, Bill.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, you should have let him in here.
I still held out hope.
People like Hugh Ross, old earth creationists, they do believe the earth's 4.5 billion years old and so forth. And they do believe that in the Cambrian explosion, where most of the major phyla came right, all of a sudden you have the jellyfish and the echinoderms and all that. But they believe that God came in at certain times and, what would you say, tweaked it or got it off the ground, or
I don't know. To me, if there's a God, and which is the greater miracle, a God who can come in every moment, every second of every day, and be tweaking or fine tuning his creation to exactly what he wants. He's continuing to work on it, or a God that can say, "Let there be light," and you have an event that takes place in which everything he wanted is all in that one event, and he knows, given time, every person, the earth, the stars, everything's going to be exactly like he wanted. Which is the greater miracle? Really, either could be true from a Christian perspective. But I think it's the greater miracle that you can say, let there be light, and everything's going to be bang. From that one cosmic event, you have a universe and an earth and everything necessary for life and the diversity of life.
Sure. So, what were you saying?
I actually have a very stupid question, and this is not an argument. This is a question for people who know more about evolution. So, when we talk about the single cell of life, people talk about how fantastic this is statistically, but that's okay because you have billions and billions of years for it to happen. Did that same thing happen with plant life, and did that have to happen simultaneously? Because then the odds are just like really crazy. But I've never seen anybody say that they have a common origin. So.
What do you think, Drew?
There are some interesting. There's not as much data about that because it's just people just don't study it as much. But
well, for example, Hugh Ross has flowering in the Genesis creation account. You have the plants coming way too early. Okay, they come in day 3 way too early. And even Hugh Ross's, he's the Old Earth Creationist, Reasons to Believe is his website if you want to check it out. Even his own people say, hey, I don't buy that, So they got problems with all this stuff. One big problem is bacteria come on the scene 3.5 billion years ago. Okay, a billion years after the Earth's created. For 3 billion years, God's just going, gosh, I cannot get past this bacteria thing. And then in the Cambrian, you got jellyfish.
Let me talk with Bill. I have to get him calmed down over here.
Is that not
Bill,
progressive creationism?
We're trying to be respectful.
Okay,
as co-founder of the book club.
Okay. But I was asking more from an atheistic perspective. Does an atheistic evolutionist believe that the single cell, life and the single cell plant kind of simultaneously?
Oh, no, plants came on the scene way 200 million years ago, way longer. Yeah. No, plants came.
I think they would say probably that plant life became animal life. So you have some type of.
I thought they were separate paths to
it did. Plants came on the scene a long time later.
Again, why do you? Why do you believe in there's this 4.51 billion years old?
Because it's consensus.
So,
and radiometric dating, which I know
you don't get the
how radiometric
No.
You know how radiometric dating works, right?
Yeah, I did. Okay. Potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, uranium, lead. We have isochrons which go and they go, what?
Okay, so how do you tell the difference between a radiogenic isotope and a non-radiogenic isotope? You can't tell the difference. It's the same thing.
It's very problematic. We've taken stones from volcanoes that just were created.
I know.
We ran them through the labs and they've said they're 1.5.
2 words, bad sample.
That's what happens when you use a yardstick to measure millimeters. So you're.
Yeah, but why do you think you're measuring that?
Because if you take potassium argon, which is what half-life of 2 billion years, and you try to measure something that just happened yesterday.
How can you tell the difference between an isochrone and a mixing line? You can't tell the difference between an isochrone and a mixing line. You can pull that apart. The same thing as a radiogenic or non-radiogenic isotope. The way that they measure, the way that they estimate the amount of radiogenic and non-radiogenic isotopes, which is how you get the age, is that they use models of the primitive composition of the primitive Earth, which already assumes that the Earth is a certain age.
Well, when rock is molten from a volcano, then the mixing of the materials goes back to a state that we know. And we know what happens to the materials.
No, we don't. No, we don't. It's an estimate.
Or uranium.
It's an estimate. When it comes out of the ground, it already has non-radiogenic isotopes in it. And so when you get it, there's a certain amount of daughter isotopes in the rock, and all of the isotopes look the same, right? All the daughter isotopes look the same. So they use a model to estimate which are radiogenic and which are non-radiogenic, which isotopes were in the rock when it emerged out of the Earth. That's non-radiogenic.
Right.
Which isotopes were a result of radioactive decay, which is radiogenic. And they use models that already assume.
But there's ways to cross-check. It's not just using a single method.
That's right.
For example, if you look at the seabed of in the Atlantic Ocean, between the ridge between the North American continent and the European, African continents, there's about 3 or 4 different independent corroborating pieces of evidence that point to 150 million years of divergence. So you take the radiometric dating as one, but in addition, there's a deposition, a regular deposition of silt and fine particles along the seabed, and you see that as you diverge from the trench that divides the two. Let's assume that you've got molten lava or rock coming up and diverging like this, and so pushing the continents apart over time. Maybe creationists think that happened all at once, just boom, you know, during the flood. It just happened all at once. I don't know. But the mainstream view is that it travels at maybe a couple inches or at most per year, and just diverges. So if you take that rate, you find that that's 150 million years of divergence, the current rate. But then you see the deposition of the silt increases the farther you get from the midpoint. In other words, if you take the rate of deposition that's happening right now and you extrapolate, you find a very consistent approach to how much silt there is farther away from the dividing line, and right at the place where it's diverging, you have none because it's just recent.
You're assuming a rate of deposition that has never changed.
Well, I'm assuming about 4 or 5 lines of evidence. You take a look at the iron filings and how they're oriented in terms of the north and south pole, the poles that tend to switch every 150,000 years. You can see this consistent pattern of iron filings turning back and forth across the bottom of the sea. So there's multiple lines of evidence that point to the same conclusion. Also, if you look at the, it's not like, I think what is trying to be portrayed is that scientists are just dumb people, or else evil people who are trying to come up with some explanation. You know, that they're basing radiometric dating off of faulty conclusions. Is that they're just you know, come out of the turnip patch. They know what they're doing, and they see multiple lines of evidence. It's not like you can just say, oh, well, what about this? What about that? I may not be able to express it that well myself, but they know what they're doing.
You do a pretty good job, Ken. Pretty good job. Let's do this, though. We're going to take a break in just a second. When we come back, we're going to make a 10-minute break. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about next month's book. I've also got another, I think, very interesting video clip for you that we want to take a look at. And then, during the break, I'm going to try to sit down and talk Bill off the ledge a little bit on this. So, thanks so much, and we'll be on a break right now.
Bill, he'd like for you to meet him in his chambers.